In the picturesque town of Maplewood, where tree-lined streets and white picket fences created an idyllic facade, the McAllister family seemed to embody the American dream. Mark McAllister, a successful architect, was known for his dedication to his craft and his love for his family. His wife, Emily, was equally admired for her grace and charm, often seen volunteering at local charities and organizing community events. They had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and to outsiders, their life appeared perfect. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form. Emily, once the vibrant center of the family, had become increasingly withdrawn. Friends noticed the change. Her laughter was less frequent, her smile more forced. Mark, consumed by his demanding job and unaware of the emotional distance growing between them, attributed her mood swings to the pressures of motherhood. Little did he know that Emily was fighting her own battles. Struggling with feelings of inadequacy and the monotony of daily life, Emily sought help. She decided to visit a therapist, Dr. Alex Reed, known for his compassionate approach and impressive track record. Their initial sessions were productive. Emily felt heard and understood for the first time in years. Dr. Reed's empathetic demeanor offered her a safe space to explore her feelings, and as weeks turned into months, a connection began to blossom. Emily confided in Dr. Reed about her struggles, her feelings of being lost in the roles of wife and mother, her fading ambitions, and her yearning for passion and excitement. Unbeknownst to her, these sessions would lead her down a dark path. The lines between therapist and patient began to blur, and what started as a professional relationship morphed into something more intimate. The two found solace in each other, sharing stolen moments that ignited a spark Emily thought she had lost forever. As the affair intensified, Emily felt a mix of exhilaration and guilt. She rationalized her actions by convincing herself that she deserved happiness, that Mark was too busy to notice. But guilt gnawed at her conscience, especially when she saw Mark's unwavering support and love for their family. He remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath their seemingly perfect light. One evening, as Mark prepared dinner and the children played in the living room, Emily's phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Reed. A thrill shot through her as she read the words, but it was quickly replaced by a pang of anxiety. What was she doing? The reality of her actions weighed heavily on her, but the allure of the forbidden kept drawing her back. Emily struggled to keep up appearances. She continued attending PTA meetings and hosting dinner parties, all while her heart raced at the thought of her next encounter with Dr. Reed. The lies piled up, and the fear of being discovered began to consume her. The more time she spent with him, the more she felt trapped in a web of deception. As the summer approached, the affair grew bolder. They met in secret, indulging in the thrill of their forbidden love. Emily felt alive again, but it was a fleeting sensation, one that could crumble at any moment. Each stolen moment left her with a sense of impending doom, but the excitement overshadowed her fears, until one fateful night changed everything. On a rainy Wednesday, Emily received an urgent call from Dr. Reed. His voice trembled with emotion as he explained that a family emergency had forced him to leave town for the weekend. "I need you to understand, Emily. I can't do this anymore," he confessed, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. "We need to end it." Panic surged within her. The thought of losing him ignited a primal fear. "No, Alex, please. I can't go back to feeling empty. I need you," she pleaded, desperation lacing her tone. The conversation ended, leaving Emily shaken. She felt her world crashing down around her, the walls closing in on her. Determined to fight for their love, she made a reckless decision. She would confront Mark, revealing everything in a bid to escape her suffocating reality. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the house was bathed in twilight, Emily steeled herself for the confrontation. She had rehearsed her words 100 times, but nothing could prepare her for the truth that would shatter their family. "Mark, we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. He looked up from the dinner table, concern etched on his face. "What's wrong?" Taking a deep breath, Emily began to unravel the fabric of their life together, laying bare the secrets she had kept hidden for so long. As the truth spilled out, the initial shock on Mark's face morphed into disbelief and then anger. "How could you?" he shouted, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "You've destroyed everything we built." "I was lost, Mark. I needed someone to help me find myself," Emily cried, tears streaming down her cheeks. In that moment, the foundation of their marriage crumbled. Mark's hurt morphed into rage, and Emily's desperation spiraled into a frenzy of emotions. The argument escalated, with accusations flying and wounds being reopened. As the night wore on, a sense of dread settled over Emily. She could feel the darkness creeping in, a suffocating weight pressing down on her. In her mind, a reckless idea began to form, a way to ensure that no one would take her happiness away. As the argument raged on, the reality of her actions pressed down on Emily like a vice. She had never intended for things to escalate this far, but now she found herself cornered, with emotions running high and her future hanging by a thread. Desperation clawed at her, and a reckless idea began to take shape in her mind, a way to eliminate the source of her turmoil. "Mark, I can't let you ruin everything. You don't understand what I've gone through," she shouted, her heart racing. "You've never really listened to me." Mark's expression twisted into one of disbelief, anger pulsing through him. "And you think running to another man and lying to me is the answer? You've betrayed me, Emily." In that moment, Emily felt a wave of panic wash over her. What if Mark decided to fight back? What if he exposed her affair? She couldn't let that happen. She needed to take control to ensure her happiness was not snatched away. "Maybe you'll regret this conversation," she murmured, her voice low but steady. The words sent a chill down her spine. What was she suggesting? The idea was wild, yet it felt strangely liberating. The thought of silencing Mark's anger forever ignited a dark thrill within her. As Mark turned to storm out of the room, Emily seized the moment. "You think you can just walk away? You think you can threaten me?" She stepped closer, her heart pounding with the adrenaline of her audacious thoughts. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." Mark paused, turning back to face her. "What are you talking about?" The confusion in his eyes was evident, but Emily could sense the fear beginning to creep in. "Maybe it's time you learned," she whispered, the words hanging in the air like a damning omen. She had crossed a line, but there was no turning back now. The tension between them crackled as Emily's mind raced. She had to act fast. Over the next few days, she carefully devised her plan, mapping out every detail. It had to be perfect. Any slip-up could lead to disaster, and she needed it to look like an accident. She spent hours plotting, her heart racing with each idea that unfolded. Mark's routine was predictable. He often went for late-night runs after work to clear his mind. It was during these moments that he was most vulnerable, alone, unaware of the darkness lurking just beyond the edge of the street. Emily decided she would use this to her advantage. The plan took shape. She would create a scenario that would lead to an accident, a tragic slip that would take him out of her life without drawing suspicion. She envisioned a scene where he would fall, perhaps hitting his head, making it appear as if he had simply lost his footing in the dark. It was both cunning and chilling. As she prepared, she felt an exhilarating rush. This was the thrill she had sought, a taste of power and control over her own destiny. She envisioned the aftermath, the sympathy from friends and family, the relief of finally being free from the suffocating reality of her marriage. On the night of the fateful run, Emily took great care to ensure everything was in place. She set the stage, the living room dimly lit, the atmosphere charged with tension as she waited for Mark to leave. As he donned his running shoes, she forced a smile, hiding her true intentions beneath a facade of normalcy. "Going for a run? Don't overdo it," she said, her voice steady. Mark nodded, oblivious to the chaos brewing inside her. "Just a quick jog. I need to clear my head." He kissed her cheek, a gesture that felt foreign given the circumstances, but she forced herself to lean into the moment. After he left, Emily's heart raced. She waited anxiously, counting the minutes as she steeled herself for what was to come. It felt surreal, like a scene from a thriller novel. She paced the house, rehearsing the plan in her mind, the adrenaline making her feel alive. Finally, as darkness enveloped the town, Emily slipped out into the night, a determined glint in her eye. She drove to the park where Mark often ran, parking her car a distance away to avoid detection. The chill in the air mirrored her internal conflict, but she pressed on, her mind focused on the goal ahead. As she waited, the sounds of the night filled her ears, rustling leaves, the distant chirp of crickets, and the rhythmic pounding of footsteps growing closer. Her heart raced as she spotted Mark rounding the corner, his figure illuminated by the soft glow of a nearby streetlight. The moment had arrived. Emily stepped out from her hiding place, feigning concern. "Mark," she called, her voice strained with feigned worry. He turned, his expression shifting from surprise to confusion as he approached. "What are you doing here?" he asked, breathing heavily. "I just wanted to see you. I'm sorry about earlier," she stammered, keeping her tone soft and vulnerable. Mark, still processing the confrontation, seemed to lower his guard. "It's fine, Emily. We just need to talk." She could see the tension easing in his shoulders, but she knew this was her chance. As they spoke, she subtly led him toward the darker part of the park, where the trees loomed ominously. "Let's just walk for a minute," she suggested, her voice a siren's call. As they stepped deeper into the shadows, Emily's pulse quickened. She prepared herself, ready to push him at the right moment, knowing that once she crossed that line, there would be no going back. Then, with a sudden surge of determination, she made her move. "Mark, I can't let you ruin my life," she yelled, shoving him with all her strength. He stumbled backward, his surprise morphing into panic as he lost his footing on the uneven ground. Time slowed as he fell, arms flailing in a desperate attempt to regain balance. Emily held her breath, a rush of adrenaline coursing through her veins as he tumbled down the small incline. The thud of his body hitting the ground echoed in the silence, and she knew it was done. Mark lay motionless, and Emily's heart raced, a mix of exhilaration and terror flooding her senses. She had taken control, but at what cost? As she approached him, dread seeped in. Had she really done it? Kneeling beside him, she shook his shoulder gently, fear pooling in her stomach. "Mark," she whispered, but there was no response. The darkness felt suffocating as she realized the gravity of her actions. Panic surged within her, but she quickly composed herself, returning to the persona she had crafted. She had to make it look like an accident. Quickly, she dialed 911, her voice trembling as she explained that her husband had fallen while running. As the operator reassured her help was on the way, Emily stood, trying to gather her thoughts. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing closer with each passing moment. She took a deep breath, the weight of what she had done crashing down around her. The plan had worked, but the reality of her choices loomed large, threatening to engulf her. As the sirens grew louder, Emily's heart raced with a mix of adrenaline and dread. She crouched beside Mark, forcing herself to appear distraught as she awaited the arrival of the paramedics. She had to keep her composure, to maintain the act of the concerned wife, whose husband had tragically fallen. When the first responders arrived, they found Emily on her knees, tears streaming down her face. "He was just running, and then he tripped. Please, help him," she cried, her voice trembling with what she hoped sounded like genuine fear. The paramedics quickly assessed Mark's condition. He lay unconscious, the result of a severe head injury from the fall. They worked swiftly, strapping him to a stretcher and preparing to transport him to the hospital. Emily followed closely behind, her heart racing as she contemplated her next move. She had to keep her story straight. At the hospital, chaos ensued. Doctors and nurses rushed around, trying to stabilize Mark while Emily played the role of the distraught wife. When the doctor finally approached her, the grim look on his face confirmed her worst fears. "I'm sorry, but he didn't make it. He suffered severe trauma." The world around her faded as she processed the news. In her mind, Emily knew she had orchestrated this outcome, yet she feigned shock and devastation. No, this can't be happening," she sobbed, attracting the attention of bystanders. As the days passed, the investigation unfolded. Detectives pieced together the events leading up to Mark's death, and Emily's frantic demeanor began to raise suspicion. Witnesses from the park recalled seeing her and Mark arguing just before the incident. The officers began to dig deeper, examining her relationship with Dr. Reed and her motivations. Emily's world began to unravel. The police confronted her with inconsistencies in her story, and when they found the text messages between her and Dr. Reed, it painted a different picture of the events leading up to that fateful night. Faced with mounting evidence, she realized her perfect plan had crumbled. In a twist of irony, Emily's desperate quest for freedom led to her own undoing. Charged with manslaughter, she sat in a cold interrogation room, knowing she had lost everything. The facade of her life had shattered. revealing the darkness she had tried so hard to conceal. In the end, her pursuit of happiness had turned into a nightmare, one she could never escape.